Hi everybody, welcome to Humanities 2172 online, the quest for a meaningful life. We are in Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises. We are in chapters 6 through 10. This is the second day on Hemingway. Though I did give you, I hope you saw it, a PowerPoint about modernism, and then also a video about Hemingway from the library's website, Films on Demand. Hope you're doing well, hope you're healthy, hope you're safe. We're only looking at two passages today from chapter 6 through 10, but I want to give you a lot of kind of the big picture why we're reading this book before we get into sort of the meat of the thing. There's going to be a lot of events that happen later on, and what we're doing today is a setup for those. The reason we are reading a book from the early 20th century for modernism, two reasons. One is that I love the language and I think it's a great book. But another reason is that during modernism, people in the West, especially right after World War I, question all the narratives of meaning that came before them. And so this is a book that takes place in a Europe in the aftermath, in the shadows, in the ruins of everything that this class has been about. The Greeks, the Romans, the Christians, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, Romanticism. All of those things came before this book, and this book is aware of all of those things. It's aware of the Romans. It's aware of Christianity deeply, which we're going to see. It's aware of the Enlightenment. It's aware of all of these times that came before. And like us, you, wherever you are, on your phone or on your computer, like me, it is living in a time after all of those movements have come and they have gone. And so World War I is a war that is fought kind of for the idea of the West. Our President Woodrow Wilson at the time says he wants to make the world safe for democracy. And literally the idea was we have to leave America, go to Europe, and we have to fight because civilization itself is at stake. Okay? Now, in the 21st century, I don't know that you would be willing to fight for civilization. I don't know that I would be willing to fight for civilization because we're so separated by our consumerism and by capitalism and by the 20th century, when the market really takes over almost every aspect of life, so that now, even while people are dying of a terrible coronavirus, a lot of the smart people are writing and saying, we got to get the economy back opened up, man. The most important thing is the economy, because so much of life is tied to the economy. So we're living in a time like Hemingway, way after all of those things. And so what I want to talk about for just a minute is those narratives of meaning and how for these characters they've broken down, and then what they're going to do about it. After World War I, a lot of artists write poetry. Ezra Pound does, T.S. Eliot does. They write novels. James Joyce does, John Dos Passos does, about that idea that there was a war fought and a great price paid for the idea of civilization, right? That somehow it's worth bloodshed to save what Ezra Pound calls a couple hundred old books and some broken down statues. We in this class believe that in knowledge of your cultural past, that understanding the Greeks, the Romans, Christianity in the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, is important. We think it's important because we think that ideas have consequences, and we think that a meaningful life is one in which you are cognizant of your cultural past, and you're also able to interpret the present through your knowledge of the past, right? But these characters, Jake Barnes in particular, but also Brett Ashley, Bill Gorton, Mike Campbell, Robert Cohn, they're living in a time after all of those cultural moments, and they're really asking the question, is there any meaning for us in any of those cultural moments? And the answer they're finding is no. we're living in Paris. This is like the future. This is the thing that's like the most of the minute. But at the same time, they're not at home. They're not settled people. They're not married. They don't have kids. They don't have like regular lives, right? They're expatriates. They're drinking like crazy, as you'll see, especially today. And they're looking for meaning. And if, as a college kid, you don't connect with any of those things, then I'm sorry, right? But I think probably you do, right? And even this class, the sell on the class is that it's a time for us to talk about what are the narratives of significance in the 21st century that are options for us. And if we were in the class together, we would talk about that. What is a life worth living? What are the things worth sacrificing for, worth dying for? What are the things worth living for, living your life for, right? And Jake is on a kind of journey in this book to find those things. Okay, let's talk about what he finds. The first thing I want to talk about is that while we're still in Paris, there is a character, the Count, paramour of Lady Brett. Brett Ashley has a lot of boyfriends in this book, and one of her boyfriends is this Count Mippopolis, and he shows us this classical idea of what it's like to be wounded in war. And if you go back to page, I think it's 67, the Count shows us his war wound. This is a literary device. You should know this. If you've got a character in a book, Jake Barnes, somewhere throughout the book, there's going to be these kind of mirror characters, other characters with similar experiences that are a contrast to Jake. So Robert Cohen could be one. The Count is certainly one, right? If you're, you know what I mean, right? In Frankenstein, it was Victor and the creature, maybe Victor and Clerval. All throughout Gatsby, you've got Nick, our narrator, and Gatsby, and then you've also got Gatsby and Tom. So you know what I mean. This is what happens. This is in chapter 7, page 67. The Count stood up, unbuttoned his shirt, opened his shirt. He pulled the undershirt onto his chest and stood, his chest black, big stomach muscles bulging under the light. You see them? Below the line where his ribs stopped were 2 raised welts. See on the back where they came out? Above the small of the back, the same 2 scars raised as thick as a finger. These are the Count's war wounds. They're arrow wounds. That's tough guy. That's the way a man is supposed to get wounded in war, right? He's ripped. He gets shot with an arrow. It goes through. He pulls it out. And so he's got his scars to tell, to show people. He's got his story to tell people. I was in the war. I was shot with the arrows. I've lived to tell about it. Jake can't do that. Jake has a wound he does not want to talk about. He has scars we don't even know about. They're so awful. But they're scars that he doesn't want to share with anybody, right? So Jake is this like new kind. He's not European. He's American. And he's this new kind of ex-soldier, this new kind of war wounded, where the wounds are literally invisible. You'll never see them, but they have a deep effect on the soldier and what the soldier's life will be like. Okay? Now, let's go to the end of 7 and the beginning of 8, because what happens here is we switch to book 2. And we talked last time about Hemingway's iceberg theory, that things happen in the text that he does not tell us about, but that doesn't mean that they don't happen. They still happen. What happens between book 1 and book 2, between chapter 7 and chapter 8, is that Brett Ashley goes to San Sebastian, and she goes with Robert Cohen. And we'll find out about that very quickly when we get into book 2. But it's another thing that is not available to Jake. Jake cannot be a lover to Brett Ashley because of his war wounds. Robert Cohen can. Jake really loves Brett Ashley, and now we see why he's been so interested in Robert Cohen for the first part of the book, right? Because Cohen is going to have this weekend with Brett Ashley, and it's gonna be one of the big events in the book that we look back to over and over. What I want to show you, though, is one of the options for Jake. if you're living in Paris in the 20s and you're not finding meaning and you don't know what is worth living for, Jake has a couple of ideas. And the first one we're going to see is fishing. And we're going on a fishing trip. And after we go fishing, we're going to the bullfights. Okay? I think we'll talk more about that next time, but these are both old ideas of meaning. These are both some of the most ancient, sort of all the stuff we've been talking about in this class, ideas of what a human being's life might be like. Let's go to page 99. This is in chapter 10. And this is him getting into this Spanish landscape. So they've left Paris, they go south, and they're heading into Spain, and he sees this beautiful landscape. After a while, we came out of the mountains. There were trees along both sides of the road, and a stream and ripe fields of grain, and the road went on very white and straight ahead, and then lifted to a little rise, and off on the left was a hill with an old castle, buildings close around it, and a field of grain going right up to the walls and shifting in the wind. I was up in front with the driver. Then we crossed a wide plain, and there was a big river off on the right, shining in the sun from between the line of trees, and away off you could see the plateau of Pamplona rising out of the plain, and the walls of the city, and the great brown cathedral, and the broken skyline of the other churches. And the back of the plateau were the mountains. Every way you looked, there were other mountains. Ahead, the road stretched out white across the plain going towards Pamplona. So he's getting out of the city, he's getting out of modernism, and he's going back in time to this old landscape, the cathedrals, the ruins, the castles. You'd think he was like a romantic, but as you know from this language, it's far, far from romanticism. And we also don't get the idea that like what's in the landscape is somehow like affecting him on a spiritual level, though we hope that that's one of the things that's still possible for him, right? Now let's turn the page and we'll see the next thing that he is trying to find some meaning in. When they get down to where they're going, I can't remember the name of the little town, Bayonne, he goes into the cathedral. Now, we haven't had a lot of faith up until now, but what we see here is that Jake is a person of a deep faith, even though he's kind of a bad Catholic. That is, he's bad at practicing his faith. Nobody else will go in with him. All the other people, not interested in religion, but he is. He starts praying. I knelt and started to pray and prayed for everybody. I thought of Brett and Mike and Bill and Robert Cohen and myself, and you should know who all those people are, and the bullfighters, separately for the ones I liked, lumping all the rest. Then I prayed for myself again. While I was praying for myself, I found I was getting sleepy, so I prayed for the bullfights. The bullfights would be good, that it would be a fine fiesta, and that we would get some fishing. I wondered if there was anything else I might pray for. I thought I would like to have some money, so I prayed that I would make a lot of money. Then I started to think how I would make it. Thinking of making money reminded me of the Count. I started wondering about where he was and regretting I hadn't seen him since that night in Montmartre, and about something Brett told me about him. And all the time I was kneeling with my forehead on the wood in front of me, and I was thinking of myself as praying. I was a little ashamed and regretted that I was such a rotten Catholic, but realized there was nothing I could do about it, at least for a while. And maybe never, but that anyway it was a grand religion, and I only wished I felt religious, and maybe I would the next time. And then I was out in the hot sun of the steps of the cathedral, and the forefingers and the thumb of my right hand were still damp. That's the iceberg theory. He's gotten water, and he's crossed himself holy water. And I felt them dry in the sun. The sunlight was hot and hard, and I crossed over beside some buildings and walked back along side streets to the hotel. What does this mean? It means that our main guy, Jake, he has lost a definition of himself as a man. A lot of the old narratives of meaning are not going to work for him. He's never going to be able to fall in love and have a family. So where is he going to look? He's going back to the old things. Fishing, bullfighting, even Catholicism, right? This kind of ancient religion for those of us who are living in the 20th century or now the 21st century. Hope you're well. I'll see you next time. Keep reading this book. We're about to get into some great fishing stuff and then some bullfighting stuff, and it gets very exciting. All right, take care. See you soon. Bye.